Live? Yes, we are. So, hello everyone. Welcome to part 4 of our training session on automating processes. I'm really looking forward to this one. And I am sorry, I apologize in advance that I am not, in fact, Mallory. I know she's been doing the first 3 episodes, but we figured it was probably a good idea to kind of get a new face into the series as we wrap up. And that's because what we're going to be looking at today is going to be a little bit different than just workflow building. It's really going to be how we connect things together. So, all that being said, I'm going to want to get into it because today we're going to be a little bit high level and then we're going to try to get really granular because this is a training session and this is the final training session of the Automating Processes series. So I'm going to get to presenting. Last thing I want to mention, as always, at the end, we'll be doing a spinning of the wheel of names for those who are attending. And if you win, you'll get an Old Florida. You won't get this cold brew because that wouldn't taste so good shipped. But it will be Old Florida and it will be a bag of coffee beans and it will also be a mug. So stick around to the end so that we can go ahead and do that. In the meantime, I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get right down into it. Also, I have an announcement at the end of this webinar that I think you'll want to see. So let's go ahead and get to it. I'm going to present my screen and here we go. Okay, you guys hopefully know the deal now. We use an interactive presentation software. So if you want to scan the QR code, you can do that so that you can answer some of these questions that we have. And it's always fun to do that. So I'll give you a couple minutes here well, not a couple minutes, a couple seconds to scan the QR code, and then we'll keep it moving. Cool. You can shoot a thumbs up once you join. Or yeah, love a good thumbs up. It affirms me as well. So I like that little encouragement. Don't we all? That's a lot of thumbs up. Okay. A little too much, guys. A little too much. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Let's move to the next. All right. First question. How helpful has this training series been so far? If you've been in the first 3 episodes, would love to hear your feedback on how helpful it's been. Very helpful. Awesome. Somewhat helpful. Good. 3. Very helpfuls. Awesome. I love to see that. It helps us. One of our priorities here at SiteStacker, if you've been with us a long time, or if you've even been with us recently, is ensuring that we have good training resources. And that's really one of the drivers of this 4-part series. Is Motion 2 and automating processes is a very complex subject, and it combines a lot of different parts of our system. And so it's hard to just create one training resource that gives it all to you in a nutshell. And so we really wanted this series to be kind of a foundational starting point. So I'm really glad to see that it was very helpful and somewhat helpful. Any type of helpful is good, and it's more helpful than if it hadn't existed. So really glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, but we got to get to the final section here. So we've talked about how to build in Motion 2 using data groups, entities, using task assignments, all kinds of stuff to really get the structure of the workflow built. And we've used the pizza parlor example, someone are applying to the pizza parlor. So we're going to keep that example going. But what I'm going to want to focus on today is a big element that can sometimes get missed. And I think this is one of the elements that needs to be iterated on constantly. And this is how to actually manage that process. So we get it built, we have the flow chart flowing, but then how are we visualizing that? How are we interacting with our applicants? How are we equipping our admin teams to be able to manage that process efficiently? And what I specifically want to go into is how SiteStacker provides some tools and features that allow you to actually take control. And that's my goal here. It's not to just show you what SiteStacker does, but to show you what you can do with SiteStacker when you take ownership of it. And so I've put together some examples, but before I do that, I want to remind everyone of this principle. Because this is key. This is key to what we're doing. Data collection, data connection, data visualization. We've talked about it quite a bit at this point, but data collection, that's that website, that's that application form. That's where the data comes in. And then there's the data connection. Again, that's where if you have multiple systems, you're spending a lot of time in the data connection section where you're just trying to connect it all together, which means you don't have as much time to visualize it. And so what we want to do is we want to show you how SiteStacker, when you're on one system specifically, but even if you're not, how when you use SiteStacker for application processes and automations, that data connection part can be automated so that you can spend more time iterating on the data visualization. And that's where the flower is. That's pretty. We want to be there. So with that in mind, don't forget that when you do data visualization right, when you have a good process for interacting with the data and the applicants and the people that interact with your organization, that it will lead to more data collection. It will lead to more engagement. It will lead to more giving. It will lead to more applications if you do it right. And that's why we're spending the time here. So with that in mind, let's focus in on this third side, because that's what this last session is about. Data visualization, and I would put in parentheses and interaction, because it's not just how you visualize it, it's giving you the tools to interact with that data. And I just wrote a note here. Managing an automated process efficiently is all about leveraging your tools to create visualization of your data in a more effective way. So how can we take the tool set we have to provide better ways to be able to interact with and visualize our data? And that's what we want to look at here. So here's how we get specific. SiteStacker's data visualization. I kind of condensed it into 3 categories for this training session. The reality is there's a lot of different potential opportunities that you can utilize in SiteStacker to visualize data. But these are the 3 prominent ones that I think can get you where you need to be. And the first section is dashboard publishing. And I really want to kind of spend a good portion of our time here. And here's why, because I think that dashboard publishing is the most underutilized part of our tool potentially. And that's because it has one of the most, I guess you could say, distant learning curves, in that it's a website, but it's not like base template, your front facing website. The rules are a little bit different, but also it's a dashboard. So you don't know necessarily what modules to use or where to put them. Is it supposed to be flexible? Is it not? I get that. What I'd like to do is reduce the distance of understanding we have from how to publish on the dashboard. Because when you understand dashboard publishing, a world of possibilities explodes. And that's where things get really fun. And again, I want to mention, and I'll probably mention this again in a coming slide, when it comes to dashboard publishing, there can be misconceptions that if you're on SiteStacker, however we built it for you is the way it is. That's the way SiteStacker does it. And that's not necessarily true. And I'm going to kind of show you why. But really, the dashboard is a platform. And you have the ownership, if you're in SiteStacker, to be able to leverage and utilize that platform how you need to get the outcomes you want. And I'm going to hopefully help you kind of think through ideas of how to do that. Next is Spark automations. And we're going to look at some specific Spark automations that I set up just yesterday. And I did it yesterday. 1, because time is a thing, but also 2, because I wanted to showcase how simple it is. Everything I'm going to show you today, I thought of and built yesterday evening, because I wanted to really show that I could do this quickly, that I could do it with efficiency. And so Spark automations, there's so much potential there, and it's not something where we can just go, here's all the things you can do with Spark automations, because it's vast. It's actually subject to your creativity and to your knowledge of the tool. So hopefully I can inspire some insights there. And then the last section is business intelligence views. And I'm not going to necessarily train you on how to configure the business intelligence views, because that's a separate webinar that deserves its own set aside time. But I will show you some of the views to hopefully inspire ideas of how business intelligence could be used, not just for giving data, but also for mobilization data and application data. And there's so many cool ways you can leverage that. So, but with the dashboard publishing and the Spark automations, we're going to get pretty granular, and I'm going to show you how to configure the things I've set up. So let's start with dashboard publishing. So what makes SiteStacker's dashboards unique? And I think we've kind of already covered it. What makes SiteStacker's dashboards unique is the fact that it's very broad in terms of what you can configure with outcomes, because it's really just a platform. It's a website template, and then you can use Site Planner or Website Builder to build whatever dashboard you want. You can create any experience. You can narrow it down with user permissions. It is so vast that it's overwhelming, which is exactly why probably some of you haven't taken advantage of some of the opportunities that lie inside of dashboard publishing, because it's so flexible, because we have so many different clients who use our software and they have different use cases and outcomes they need to operate with. We leave the dashboard pretty broad, but there's a lot of opportunity there. And so what I'm hoping is we can start to narrow down that broadness to show you some of the opportunities that exist. And so it's, in a way, what makes SiteStacker's dashboards unique can be a blessing and a curse depending on how you take advantage of it. It can be a blessing because of all the amazing opportunities that lie ahead of you, but it can be a curse if you don't realize those opportunities are there and you're just using whatever was built for you. And so let's keep moving, because here's the first point about dashboards: modules, modules, modules. You may have noticed that SiteStacker has a ton of modules. In fact, We have so many modules that sometimes our team doesn't even know what these modules were for. And the reason for that is because there were times in the past 10 years where we worked with a missionary organization who needed a specific outcome. And so we built a module for them. And then just turns out no one else needs that. And so there it is, it's existing. So there's a lot of modules that you may not need. But at the same time, there's a lot of modules that you may not have explored yet, that you may not have tried to configure, that can provide very helpful views when it comes to data visualization and interaction. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to showcase like 6 of those modules that I used for the pizza parlor workflow. And I'm going to show you how I configured them, show you what I configured, and then I'm going to show you later how I connected them together to actually create an outcome. Because you can configure a module, but if it's just a module, that's just what it is. It's when you publish it in a dynamic way that you start to bring the benefit from that. And so let's look at some of the modules we have. You may know about some of these, you may not know about some of these, but what I want to really help you understand is how we can utilize these in an actual effective way. So one of the modules in this mobilization, this process application framework that we use, it's called the group progress module. Now, some of you guys may have used this, some of you may have not, but what this module does is it allows you to see every single person who's applied or had what we call an engagement into a workflow, and you get to track their status. You get to see which task they are on and which tasks they haven't completed yet. And it really gives you just a high level look at all the progress from one granular view. And that's really great. And that provides a lot of benefit. But on top of that, you get to configure that pretty dynamically. There's a lot of configuration options there. You can filter down who you want to see. You can filter down what tasks you want to see. And that gives you publishing opportunity. And that's really, again, limited only by creativity. How can I use this? We're going to dive into that. But that group progress module, I highly recommend for anyone who's managing a process and wants to be able to see a high level view over how to manage that process. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a lot of this webinar. I'm going to share my screen, another screen, and it should be familiar if you're in SiteStacker because this is Site Planner. Okay, if you guys can see that, I'm in our webinar, our installation. And what this is showing is I've created this little webinar right here folder. And I have the pizza workflow pages on the dashboard and the listings because we built the workflow before, but we didn't build the pages yet. And so what I did yesterday is I built all these pages. And then over here on the left side, you'll see this folder called dashboards modules. Now, if you guys are following along on your installation, it's most likely you have that same folder, and it's going to be under your dashboards folder, and it'll be dashboards modules. And you probably have a bunch of stuff already built here. I'm going to be honest. One of the easiest ways to get started is don't even look through what's built. Just start a new folder like I did here, open the webinar folder, and just start adding items, looking through what's there, what's possible. And there's obviously a lot of stuff here, which is why hopefully we can get started here. And so what you'll notice is down here, I have a applicant progress module that I added. So I'm going to right click and edit that. So this is called the group progress module. So you might want to note that down. If you want to build this, you can look up group progress. And in this module, you're not just creating, again, the module, you're configuring specific adjustments you want to make to that instance of the module based on how you want to publish it and how you want people to interact with it. And so down here, you have engagement in person. We use engagements for applications because each instance of an application is an engagement. And so that's the cleanest way to track it. And then you can choose whether the column is a landmark or task. And then down here, you get to actually choose the workflow you're tracking. So you see I have pizza parlor application. You can choose any workflow inside of Motion 2. And then you get to choose the parent landmark, which in most cases, if you're trying to track the whole process, you're going to want to track all tasks because that allows you to pull any task inside of the workflow. If you choose application, you're going to be restricted to only the tasks that are inside of that. And so usually you're going to want to use all tasks if you're trying to track the progress through a whole workflow. That's what I selected here. And this is where it gets fun is you get to actually choose the specific tasks you want to actually pull in. So I don't want the initial approval to show up on the applicant progress because I just want to see the applicant tasks in this case. But if you wanted to, you could just click that. I'm going to unclick it because I want to unclick it, but that allows you to customize that. So when I'm done choosing the tasks, you can also have the ability to add filters, and you can filter by the applicant name. You can filter by a number of things. Let me zoom out so I can scroll, age, all kinds of stuff, any data group, and entity you can filter by. So there's a lot of options there. You can already tell there's some creative stuff you could do, but I'm not going to get too deep because we have a lot to cover, and I'm going to save and close. I don't think I've made any changes. And then once you do that again, you've now created the module, but you still have to publish it. And that's where, again, I went simple in this case. We have a lot of core structures that we've set up here. You don't have to play with that if you don't want to. You can create a new folder. All I recommend is that when you create a new folder, you edit it and you add a visibility condition so that you can restrict it to only the people who have user permissions that want to see it. But when you add a new folder, it gives you the flexibility to just start creating. And I'm a new folder kind of guy. Instead of me having to play with the baggage of other folders, I just like to try a new folder so I can get creative and build the experience I want to build. So that's what I did yesterday. I just created a webinar folder, and then I created a pizza workflow section and a listing section. And we'll get into the listing section. But in the pizza workflow, I have the task page, I have pizza applicants, and pizza topping options. And pizza applicants, if I preview this, is where I have my group progress module. Now there's a little spoiler in there. Now this is exactly how I configured it. I can see the progress. Is that you can see that this page has more than just the group progress module published on it. And that's where we get to combining everything through publishing. So I'm going to take a pause there. That's the group progress module. Again, hopefully that you have the recording if you want to revisit any of that. But I highly recommend you utilize that. Oh, one more thing that I'll mention is before we get to the next one, is that when you publish a module, you're going to want to set up a wrapper and publish it into the module holder view class or view. And so I'll show you how to do that when I share the next module. I'm going to share a couple more module ideas with you that I utilized in this workflow. Applicant grid. Okay, this is very simple. You've all used this. You've all utilized it every day. If you go to my contacts, all contacts, my children, sponsors. Here's the reason I'm featuring this, because while everyone uses it, I don't know if everyone has the knowledge to be able to take advantage of it the way it can be. Because at the heart of the it's called CRM. So it's not actually an applicant grid. So I should rename that. It's the module is just called CRM. In this context, I'm using it as an applicant grid. And the reason is because I can configure that grid to show whatever columns I want, to have whatever filters I want, and to enable a bunch of different features that allow me to interact with it. And so I'm going to spend a little time going into this grid because I think it's important that everyone understands what the flexibility of using this grid is, because when you publish it together, it creates a really awesome page. And so that's the applicant grid. And we're going to look at that. But really quickly, I want to show you the other things. Data group module. This is another module that maybe none of you have used. I don't know. It's really a module that's been around for a while, but it just hasn't been implemented too much with. But it's really cool. What it allows you to do is to pull any data group. For those of you who are aware what the data groups are, it's the structure of data fields that you can build to really most of the time create multi-select dropdowns inside of a workflow. So that's a thumbs up. I just gave myself a thumbs up. All right, so with that in mind, what this data group module does, it allows you to select a data group, to publish it on the dashboard so that anyone who has permissions to that dashboard page can add an option to that data group or edit other options. So we're going to look at that. I'm going to show you how to use that. There's a lot of different unique use cases we can use that for. And then an activity grid. This is an interactive configurable grid that can be used to track activities and interactions that have taken place with applicants. Again, some of you may have used this, but what you may not know is this can be configured as well. This is an activity grid. So that means it's actually just like a CRM grid in a sense, but with different specific items you can show based on our activities component. And that allows you to actually configure what is shown here. So exactly all of these columns in the screenshots I'm showing, I built yesterday based on what I wanted to see for this workflow. And I'm about to share my screen again to show you how it all works together. And then we'll deconstruct that. And then last step is publishing flexibility. Again, using the dashboard tool and template, you have the flexibility to publish all those modules in a unique way to create unique experiences. So without further ado, let's look at it holistically and let's look at the what I built yesterday. So, okay, we should see Site Stacker again. So let's hop into the front end. So you can see I'm logged in as myself. I have my task list here. There's a couple things you're seeing here. And I see that there's an application form that's been submitted that I'm ready to approve. We'll get to that. That's based on the workflow that Mallory built. We'll get to some added things that we've configured into that. But if you look down here, I've added a pizza exclamation mark because you can't say pizza without an exclamation. I've added a pizza menu option. Now, within this pizza menu option, I have this pizza applicants page. Now, this is, again, showcasing all those modules I just showed and how they can be put together for like a unanimous page that allows me to interact with all applicants from one view. And so I see all of the applicants' status. I can see he's been approved. I can see they're one step away from approval. And then I can actually see their details down here. And not only can I see their details, but I can interact with them. So I can hit actions and send a message to Brady if I want to. And then that message would track down here in the applicant activity grid so that I can see the messages I have sent to them. And in this case, I have this activity grid set up to show Brady Lively with his email, the subject I sent, when I sent it, and the body of the text. And that's all kind of interacting and flowing together. The other thing that I've configured here on this CRM grid is the ability to create a record, which you have the ability to choose whether you want to enable that option or not. But right from this grid, I can create a record. And what's cool about this is this grid is filtering only to the applicants who have applied to the pizza workflow, not all of my CRM. And I'm doing that via record type. And the record type is pepperoni, or I think it's pizza applicant. And so that pizza applicant record type assigns the moment they submit the form. So let's deconstruct, head to application part 1. And this is the initial form that they submit. And you can see I added an apply pizza applicant record type applicant role to the applicant role when that task is completed. So when they submit the pizza parlor application form, they're going to have that record type that will automatically put them on this dashboard inside of this grid. So that's already configured. Now, what's cool is, let's say real world setting, right? They might go to the website and fill out the form without me ever meeting them. That's possible. Or I might meet them. I might hear, oh, I'm interested in that pizza parlor position you have. And so instead of waiting for them to fill out the form or me necessarily having to get their text information, maybe I can just get their email and I can enter it right here. So let's enter Jimbo Jimson and I'll enter his email. Danny plus Jimson at wntech.com. And then gender, and then I'm going to save. So when I save that, it's going to add the record type pizza applicant automatically because I've configured that inside of the CRM grid. And let me show you what that looks like. So I head into Site Planner, and I'm going to head in. This is my pizza applicants page. I'm going to open this up, and that's pizza applicant details. I named it that. This is my CRM grid. If I click Edit and I go into the details, this is going to start to show you how configurable this grid is. So I have the grid view, I have the map view, I'm filtering it by the logged in relationship. And then right here in the record creation settings, I have the ability to specify which record type gets added to records that are created from that grid. Now, you might think that that's not that cool, or what can that be used for? Well, it can be used for quite a bit because when I specify that, now I can go into Spark or Motion 2, and I can send a message to that person on that type assignment, which I think I have set up in Spark right here. If you can see, this person type is pizza applicant, create user for person ID. And if I wanted to, I could add an outcome anytime that type assignment adds to send a message to actually notify that person that they have been added to the system with an automatic link to the application form. And so what that does is it allows you to do lead generation in an automated fashion because you can configure that grid to be able to create that record type and add it to Jimbo Jimson here. He's going to add to that application pool, even if he hasn't filled out the application yet. But that's going to automate that email to have him fill it out. And then you can track whether he's filled it out or not, because you can see he hasn't filled out application part 1 on his record. And then from there, you can continue to contact him, send him a message. In fact, you could enroll him into a drip campaign, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But that's just some of the configuration settings. Again, I'm like struggling right now to figure out how deep to go because there's so many options and there's so little time. But when you get down into this CRM grid, not only can you do that, but you can specify the exact record URL. So when you click, for instance, back on the front side, that link to that person's name, you can specify which link it goes to. And where that comes in handy is you have this record detail view where you can see all the details about them. But in the dashboard side, you can configure as many of those record detail views as you want. And you can specify from which grid do you go to which record detail. And where that comes in handy specifically is if you have admins who you want them to be able to interact with Brady Lively here, but you don't want them to see like his giving history or specific like information that you don't want them to have access to. You can create a secondary record detail view and link to that from the grid where those admins are from by clicking in here in the CRM record URL. Okay, so continuing down, I know this is very granular, but that's kind of part of the process. You can set filters, and that's where I set my hidden filter. So if you want to set up a grid that has a hidden filter that can automatically and by default filter down to a certain criteria, you can do that by adding a filter here and leave the data field empty. And I specifically usually use this for record type because record type is one of the easiest unique identifiers or categorization tools we have. And so if you go to filter type and CRM record type, you can label it whatever you want to, hidden record filter. And this is going to be how you're going to control what records show up on which grids. And so if I go is hidden, if I check that, and you could do that to any filter, it doesn't have to be a record type filter, it could be any filter you add, and then you save, then that filter is automatically going to be applying when I load that grid. And so then you have your selection of record types that you'd like to filter to. And so in this case, what I did, if I deconstruct, I'm going to delete that one I just added. And what I did when I added this one is I just limited to the pizza applicant record type. Now, let's say I wanted to see everyone except pizza applicants. You can just negate that filter by selecting that checkbox there, and it's going to show everyone except people who have the record type pizza applicant. So you can kind of go either direction there. And then from there, you have full customization of which columns you want to show. So for instance, favorite pizza topping. That's a pretty important one. And if you chose anchovies, you can leave. I'm just kidding. No, anchovies I think are okay. However, favorite pizza topping is going to be something that I want to see on that grid. And it's something that the applicants fill out. So it's specific to this grid. And you can see that if I go back to the grid, that's my first column right there. You have full control over that. Every single entity that you are tracking inside of your database, you can surface as a column on a CRM grid. So even if it wasn't pizza topping, if I scroll down, here's all your basic fields on CRM. You can use those. I have to zoom out because it doesn't scroll if I'm zoomed in. But you can surface relationships. You can surface all of the different entities that you want to surface. So if you want to see their hobbies, whatever you're tracking through entities, which by the way is completely flexible, you can surface inside of a grid so that you can get quick access to that. All right, I think we probably spent enough time on the grid because again, there's a lot. But the main point is if you want to start configuring grids, I'd say do this. Create a folder on Site Plan side or Content Explorer side. Start adding, click CRM, and then just save and start exploring all the configuration options. Again, you're never going to go wrong by just going down and starting to configure columns and filters. That's going to get you started. But then from there, you'll notice that on this page, if you want to publish that on the dashboard, you're going to want to use a basic wrapper. And when you publish that basic wrapper, which is going to be just for reference over here, that basic wrapper is going to be down here in the wrapper folder. You're going to drag that basic wrapper over to the page you want to publish it on, similar to Site Planner with the main website. And then you're going to select body position. And if you're publishing a module, you're always just going to choose module holder. That's the simple way to just get started. You have different spacing and padding view classes you can add to that. But if you select module holder, then all you need to do, I just canceled that one, is drag the specific module you want to publish into that module holder, and it will show up just like this. And so what I did is I published 3 module holders with 3 different modules on top of it to create a nice little applicant view. Okay, the last thing here is the activity grid. I'm not going to go too in depth into that one, except for the fact that you can publish it. And if you open the activity grid, whoops, that's the CRM. Let me open this one. Pizza applicant activity. It's called Activity Grid, so that's pretty self-explanatory. And then down here, you can title it. You can choose whether it's a grid view, and then you have similar options to the CRM grid of configuring filters and columns. There's just going to be different options there than what you had on the CRM grid that are specific to activities. Okay, so that's activities. Now I want to show you something because there's one module that's not showing here, and there's a couple ones that I want to look at. So if we go over to my tasks, okay, what you'll notice from this page is I have my tasks here, and then in the bottom right, there's this little button called Edit Pizza Topping Options. Remember how pizza toppings are important? Well, what if instead of having to go into SiteStack or admin and go to data groups and find pizza toppings and then add it here and then save it and then go back to the dashboard to verify that it works? What if I could just do that right from the dashboard where my task list is? What if my mobilization admins could do that without having to learn admin and learn data groups? Well, you could technically do that because we have this data group module where if I edit pizza topping options, and it's going to take me to the pizza toppings data group, and it allows me to edit any of these or add new ones. So for instance, I added pepperoni because I couldn't believe that wasn't an option. That's what I would choose. But I want to add cheese because some people just like the cheese. In fact, we did favorite foods with our team, and 3 of our team chose cheese as their favorite food over all other foods. So we're going to have to add that. And then I'm going to save that. And now cheese is an option. Now what's cool is if I go over to the front-facing site, which let's go to over here. I'm going to pull the form out, but it's going to log me out. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. If you give me 1 second. To here, pizza application form. Okay, let's go here. Size pizza. Okay, I'm showing you this to show you that now there's a cheese option on the form, which actually, wait, hold on. Looks like, let me reshare my screen to the incognito window. Here you go. Okay, if you can see that. If I'm here, I can see my favorite pizza topping. Cheese is now an option. I know you couldn't see the drop down because screen shares are weird, but cheese is now an option. And I just configured that straight from the task list. I didn't even have to go anywhere else. That's just a super cool little feature. And there's numerous ways that you could leverage that feature for your processes. It doesn't have to be adding an option to a form. It could be a number of things. So that's the data groups module. Now let's head back here. So then I go back to my task list, and let's say I have listings, and you may or may not use this. This is an ability to actually manage website content right from the dashboard. So again, these modules are cool, but the cool thing is how simple it is to do right from where my normal workflow is. So in many of your guys' cases, you have super admins who already have access to SiteStacker, and you can do all of this from the SiteStacker admins panel. But as you know, the training for SiteStacker admin is a little bit more intensive. And so training like a mobilization person who all they have to do is manage the process on how to edit site planner items and publish site planner items and edit data groups can be a little bit cumbersome, and it means they have to go to 2 different places. So the more we can bring those functional activities that they need to accomplish over here to the dashboard, the better the experience and the more efficient it will be. And so this is, I'm calling it all listings, but this module, I'll show you the exact name. If I open Site Planner and I scroll down to, or up here, the actual name of this module is called the Content Grid. So for those of you who don't know, the Content Grid module allows you to configure a specific content type, like in this case, the opportunity content type, which is the content type that we use on the front-facing website to generate applications, to publish, hey, we have an opportunity in the pizza parlor in Tallahassee, and we think it'd be a great opportunity for you. You have to specialize in throwing dough, whatever, probably none of you have that opportunity, but whatever your opportunity is, we use that content type. But in this module, I can say I want to create a grid where admins can see all of the content that are opportunities content. And then I also want to configure the columns so they can see information about it. But more importantly, I want them to be able to preview the listing, publish the listing, and unpublish the listing. So right here, I'll show you how that all functions. But it gets pretty dynamic because you'll notice on this page's setup, I have all listings. And then I have create listing and edit listings. So what that means is I'm not just seeing the opportunities that are on the website, I'm actually able to edit them and create new ones and publish them right from the dashboard. And so the way I can do that is I set it up to where I see, for instance, pizza parlor as an opportunity. I can right click actions, I can hit preview listing, and now I see my pizza parlor opportunity. It's pretty lame. Don't replicate my publishing here. You want to have more dynamic content, but for sake of example, I published it through this grid, and then it showed up here on the website. And then if I open this by clicking on the link, it's going to allow me to get into that specific content items details, type in the name, the summary, the body, change the images, and even tag it. And you have full configuration control over what fields show up here. And so, for instance, if I go back to the module and I go to my edit listing version, that's the page I'm on now. That's the page that links to from the grid. And if I open that, that module is called edit item. And so it dynamically links together. But if you publish the edit item module, you're going to have different options here, like whether this is a module where an admin will be making edits or like an owner. And the difference is if it's an owner, if you're a missionary sending, many missionaries own their own campaigns. And so if it's an owner, that you'll select that. That's usually for when missionaries edit their own campaigns. If it's an admin, that's when you have an admin who needs to edit a bunch of different campaigns. From here, you can select the stages that they can send it to. And for those of you who don't know about publishing stages, that's a whole nother training session, but you have the ability to configure all types of publishing stages and then have a publishing process to where I submit this content and then someone approves it. Once they approve it, it actually publishes on the website. But in this case, I'm just doing published and unpublished. And then down here is where you actually get to choose what fields from that content type you want to enable over here. So if I didn't want people to edit the cover image, because as an organization, we use the same cover image for every opportunity, you see what I just did? I just clicked it and hit that left arrow, and now that's not an option. So if I save and close, and I go back into this edit item and refresh, I don't have cover image anymore. It's not there. You can also do the same thing with tags. For instance, if you want people to be able to tag by the listing type, but not by any other tag categories, then you'll just select listing type. But if you also wanted them to tag it by the region it's in, you can add the regions tag category right there. And if you go back, there'll be another category that I can choose from right here. And so again, this just opens the door to being able to easily and efficiently manage a process. Now, there's also an ability, you'll see there's a hovering button similar to the hovering button that said edit pizza toppings on the task list. And that hovering button will allow you to create a new content item from scratch. So let's say you have a new opportunity come up. You don't need to go to Site Planner. You can just come to this page, create a new listing, enter all the information, make sure you tag it appropriately so it shows up on your website. And that's Site Planner training, which making sure that all the items that are tagged appropriately publish in the right way. If you've done that, then you can do all of this from here without ever going into Site Planner. And in fact, as an example, let's say I went into Pizza Parlor and I changed the listing type to engineering, just to show you some of the ways. Let's say I save that can affect publishing. I go over here, and on the front-facing website, I have this map set up, which was designed for our Site Stacker conference that happened in October. And you can see there's engineering opportunities here. Now, because I just tagged that opportunity inside of the dashboard, it's going to dynamically publish under the engineering section here. And so that allows me to basically control dynamic publishing, especially when it comes to recruiting content, right from the dashboard. And because you're tagging in a smart and kind of strategized way, it's going to publish dynamically in the way you want it to, so that these map views are performing optimally without demanding a lot of effort. Okay, there's a lot of information here. I don't know if everyone was ready for that. I'm hoping it's been helpful, but we're going to keep going here. Let's see. One last thing I want to look at right here is this edit pizza toppings button, and also the create new listing. I want to show you how I did that. If you don't know, we have a view inside of Site Planner. So I'm going to open the task list where that pizza toppings button is. We have a view inside of Site Planner for the dashboard task or dashboard template that's called floating button. You can see it right there. And so what that allows you to do is if you go, I'm going to show where that is by right clicking and clicking show and explore. If you go to the static content and you create a new item, I'm not going to create, I'm just going to show you what I did. All you have to do is put name over here. That's for site stackers purposes. And then scroll down and then add text to the button label. This is the button section of the content. And then add a custom URL and put whatever URL you want in there. Once you do that, then you're basically, I'm going to unpublish this so I can show you how to publish it. You're basically going to go back, and because I unpublished it, you'll notice that's no longer there. Okay, that's hopefully that's self-explanatory. And then if I go over here and click edit pizza topping options, and I drag that into the task list, I'm going to have an option. It can do any of these options, but the floating button option is the one I'm looking at. That's going to turn that button into a floating button that will stay visible as I scroll up and down the page. And you can even choose where you want that positioned. If I want it on the top left, I can do that. If I want it on the top right, I can do that. In this case, I'm going to do bottom right because I just think that for some reason, that's where my mind goes. All right, so now if I refresh that because I did that, I see the edit pizza topping options. So that's completely wide open. You could link to whatever you want. If you want to link to resources, if you want to link to a checkout, you could literally do that. You could actually paste a hyperlink into there that has a URL parameter that fills the checkout with a specific campaign in SiteStacker and a specific amount, and even default that to recurring. And that can happen all from the dashboard. So that's, again, finding ways to create an ecosystem in your dashboard rather than this being just the administrative side. If I'm an applicant, maybe find ways to link me to resources and things that make me more engaged with the organization. And this is a flexible way of publishing. It's kind of a little Easter egg there. All right. So that's kind of modules. I'm going to park the brakes on modules for sake of time because, man, time really flies when you're training on dashboards. So I'm going to move to the next section. And again, hopefully that at least helped begin inspiring some ideas and giving some insights into how dashboards can be configured. My main goal is to show you that it's not static. It's you can go in there and change it, and I encourage you to do that. Go play around with the tool. But next up, and I love this one. I did all these Spark automations yesterday. I don't know how much you've utilized Spark, how much you've utilized automations, or how much you've utilized Spark and Motion 2 to interact with each other. But there's so much flexibility here, specifically when it comes to interacting with a process like the pizza parlor process we built. And so I'm going to show you some ideas, just 2 Spark events and outcomes that I built that are going to have some good impact and show you some of the capabilities. So first is create a campaign automatically. So this is kind of a cool one. I don't know how many of you know this, but like in this Motion 2 workflow, let's say many of you are probably applying this to missionary application processes or processes that have a final approval. And in many of those processes, there's usually a fundraising effort that's attached to the other end of the approval. And so for many people, we'll run the workflow until we get to this section, which let me share my screen here. I'm going back and forth between screens, but that's life. All right, so you'll run the workflow here. This is Motion 2, and then I'll open application part 2, for instance, and then there's your final approval task, right? And so once that final approval happens, we usually like change the engagement status to complete, and we consider that done. Well, there's 2 things I'm doing here that are not considering that done, and I'll show you exactly what that is. I added 2 little tasks or little triggers to the end of the approval that are going to keep the engagement flowing and keep the automations happening. So first one is on final approval, I'm going to apply the pizza applicant approved record type, which I created. And that's another like layer. We had the pizza applicant record type assigned when they initiated the form. And then the pizza applicant approved is going to assign to that applicant once they've completed the approval process. And one thing to note here is conditional logic and some trigger conditions here that you can utilize. So for instance, I have it set up to task completion. So when that final approval task is completed, this trigger is going to fire off if, and that's what this conditional logic is for. It's a field value match that's based on the condition value that the final approval question was answered to yes, which means the admin said, yes, they are approved. If they weren't approved, this won't fire off because they're gone. That's pretty harsh, but yeah, they're no longer part of the process. If they were approved, this is going to fire off, and that's that conditional logic piece. And there's a lot you can do with that as well. Which I know has been explored a little bit earlier in the training series. So I have this pizza applicant approved. So, but in Motion 2, that's the extent of it. So now that contact has pizza applicant approved record type. So what does that do? Well, that's where we get to Spark, because Spark is where you really start to connect applicants and data with other parts of the system. So if I open up Spark here, what you'll see is I also added a Spark event called person type is pizza applicant approved. So when they get that person type assignment, that's that record type assignment, in motion 2, once the final approval is given, all of these events, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 events are going to fire off instantly. And those events are this: that person is going to create a missionary content item in the SiteStacker website, in the active folder, and it's going to share the owner's person ID as their external ID. And it's going to create a campaign name that's matching that person's CRM record name. And it's going to set a campaign goal amount to 1,000. And then it's going to sync all of that and even specify a specific accounting code that I've set on this automation. And then it's also going to assign a tag, which is a publishing tag, to that project. So what did I just explain there? What I set up there is a Spark event based on the conclusion of a workflow process that's going to create a fundraising campaign for that pizza parlor applicant. Because in our pizza parlors, you got to raise $1,000 before you can begin to work for us. I know it's a little bit weird, but it's what we do. But I think I did that because that matches some of the missionary processes that we have where you have to fundraise a certain amount to get to the field. And in many cases, all that's being manually done. But I don't know if you noticed, but you can actually kind of automatically build that out using events and outcomes like this, so that as soon as that applicant finishes their approval, now there's a campaign created. That's just super cool with a specific goal amount. So you already have their fundraising goal set once their campaign has been created. And by the way, if you wanted to get more granular with that, that campaign goal amount outcome could be based on other criteria. So for instance, if the Tallahassee pizza parlor requires $1,000 to get started and the Virginia one requires $1,500, you could have a record type that assigns based on which pizza parlor I'm applying to. And that would then, based on this Spark event, this person type Spark event for that record type, change the goal amount. So you can set those goal amounts based on record types. That's, by the way, is a new Spark outcome that I recommend everyone utilize. So again, don't know if you knew you could automatically create fundraising campaigns at the conclusion of a process, but you can. Now, a couple things that won't be in that is like bio, summary, etc. However, you could also set up that whenever this person type pizza applicant approved gets created, a send message outcome by going outcome, send message, and you could select a group, which could be your mobilization group, which in this case is your pizza parlor staff. And it could be new campaign has been created. Please add details, etc. I'm not going to read all that. And then what that would do is on that same event, notify your mobilization admin that that new campaign has been created. And then they're going to head back into the dashboard. And do you remember that listings? They can go here. They can search for the name, and they can add any more details they want to add for that campaign. So it becomes a lot easier to manage the fundraising outcome that comes after that. Again, you don't have to do it the exact way I did it. I invented this process, which may or may not be a good one, yesterday, and then built out the outcomes to support it on that same day. So again, you don't have to do it the exact way, but hopefully it opens up the thinking of what you can do. So that's that first person type is pizza applicant approved outcome. Let me show you one more. And I'm going to share this screen because this next one I think is actually even cooler. And it may or may not be something you've taken advantage of, but I know we've had a lot of people reach out about it. So I really want to cover it. By the way, I had steps written down here, but I just went ahead and showed you. If you want to review this, I wrote these down so that you could watch this recording later and kind of replicate the same steps. So it's not extremely granular, but it should be enough in those steps to get you to replicate what I built there. Okay, next, drip campaign. I think this is obviously something that the market's very aware of. We want to initiate more drip campaigns automatically. So in this case, I want to initiate a drip campaign with my pizza parlor applicant as they're fundraising because they've begun this fundraising stage. Well, I want to automatically reach out to them, remind them to keep it up, check in on them. How do I do that? Well, you're going to do a Spark outcome that blends together with a Motion 2 outcome. And so this is actually, and in fact, actually, forget Spark. I forgot. I was going to do Spark on this one, but you don't even need to do Spark. Let me show you. It even gets simpler. So let me show you what I set up in Motion 2. Okay, if I open Motion 2, now you'll notice right here, there's the admin final approval. What wasn't here before was the post-approval drip campaign, which I created as a new landmark. And this drip campaign, what I did is I created a standard task. If I open that up, I did task type standard. I assigned it to an admin, and that way it doesn't show up on the applicant's task list. And then I named it drip campaign. And that's all I did. That task is literally just a placeholder that's supposed to fire off a drip campaign. And so then once I created that task, I created 3 separate emails here. And what I did is if you open this up, you can create emails or triggers, I should say, that fire off of task assignment. So a lot of triggers usually fire off task completion. So like when I fill out a form and I submit it, then the next trigger fires off. But you can also do it on task assignment. And in fact, you can do it on task due, which is if you set a due date on a task, that trigger would fire on the due date. But I like task assignment in this case because there's this delay feature right here. Relative to source, I'm going to delay 3 days. And after 3 days of that task being assigned, drip email number 1 is going to go out to the applicant, not to the admin. I can specify that here. And then on the next trigger, I can set up same thing on task assignment, but I'm changing the relative source to 7 days. So 7 days after the applicant finishes their completion of the workflow, I'm going to send them drip email number 2. Here's the body content. And then lastly, 10 days later, I'm going to send them drip email campaign number 3. And so that's all based on this task delay based on task assignment. And I think that the flexibility there is really great. It's automated drip campaigns. The goal with these drip campaigns is to fire them off and not have to think about them very often. That's the goal. So if you're wanting to get like a mail tool that allows you to just basically interact with each drip campaign and get real custom with how you set those up every single time, maybe this isn't the best way. That's why we have a MailChimp integration, and you could fire off journeys, which they call their drip campaigns, customer journeys, from SiteStacker if you wanted to using record types. But if you just wanted a drip campaign that connects to the Motion 2 workflow and that allows you to actually, because one of the benefits here is in the notification body, I can pull any variables I want from this drip campaign. And so if you want to be able to do that, you could do it right from SiteStacker, and you can even set up different Spark outcomes to read. Like for instance, if you set up in Spark, anytime a new contribution goes to a project that's in a specific project folder, like let's say you set up a drip campaign project folder and you say drip campaign, and and all the projects that you put inside of that drip campaign folder, if you add a project there, are the projects that you're marketing in the drip campaign. Well, then you can set up a Spark that anytime someone gives to that project, you're maybe enrolling them into a drip campaign. So not only are you enrolling the applicant into a drip campaign, but you're enrolling any donors to the drip campaign as well. So the point is, I know there's a lot to follow there, and I realize I'm running out of time. I really underestimated how long this would take. It's getting a little ambitious. So I'm hoping this has sparked some ideas, but that's just how you can use Spark and Motion 2, different things to trigger things that really don't end the experience. Like it's not just about the flow, it's about managing it, and it's about things happening automatically that can help us engage people at a deeper level. So that's some insights on how to do that. I'm going to get back to my presentation and go to speed mode here because I do want to allow time for Q&A. So let's go ahead and dive through the rest here real quick. So again, these are notes. You can review this in the recording if you want. Pause the screen. The last section here is business intelligence. I'm going to go really quickly through these because this is not a training on business intelligence. That deserves its own time, as I mentioned before. But I want to show you some of the ways we've used business intelligence for mobilization in the past. If you have access to the business intelligence tool, you can start working on stuff like this. Workflow progress. Like we have the group progress module that I showed earlier that works, that's easy to set up. But if you wanted to get really specific and granular with how you track workflow progress for all your applicants, you could actually build a business intelligence tool tracking the candidate, tracking the role that they applied for, tracking the status of their application based on engagement status. You can track which tasks they last completed. That's just what we came up with. You could come up with basically anything when it comes to business intelligence. And that's where business intelligence really gets fun, because the other side of that is you could publish this same view on that same applicant dashboard in a new page so that you have access to all of this insight right from that same pizza parlor application dashboard page section. Types of applicants. If you had record types, for instance, this person's applying for Pizza Parlor Tallahassee, this person's applying for Pizza Parlor Virginia, you can track who's applying for what here. You can create pie charts with the business intelligence view. You can get really nice oversights of the different types of applicants that are coming in. This is something we've done for a client, and I think it's going to be really effective. We're really in the business of exploring how we can continue to leverage business intelligence on top of dashboard publishing, on top of the different modules we have available to create really good data visualization when it comes to process automation. Again, I'm kind of progressing fast. Fundraising progress. What if you have fundraising like what I just explained to you, and you wanted to be able to track the progress of all your fundraisers, all of your missionaries who are fundraising to get to the field? They've completed the application. Now they're fundraising. How do we make sure we automate the tracking and follow up with that? Well, you have the drip campaign. That's fine. You can reassign tasks. That's cool too. But maybe you want to just get one quick view to see how all the fundraising progress is going. So you can see in this test example, it's not going very well. But as soon as data started coming in for fundraising, you'd see how much they raised, what their goal is, what percentage complete, and what their target date is, which can be, if you, and this is a super Easter egg, we'll probably explore this in another webinar at some point, but you see that target date field? This is super cool. From business intelligence, you can actually hyperlink to a task for a specific person. And I'm going to leave that there. What that means is that target date is actually a Motion 2 task that you can change. And that means that you can interact with Motion 2 straight from business intelligence. Some of you may not know what that means because that wasn't the greatest explanation. We need more time to dive deeper into that. But what that means is we have so much flexibility with how we interact with tasks and data from business intelligence. So that's pretty cool too. You can turn that fundraising progress into a graph bar as well to see how many people are 20 to 40% complete, how many people are less than 20, how many people are 60 to 80, for example, how many are 100. You can set that up however you want in the business intelligence tool as well. All right, guys, we've finished the training for now. And so I wanted to just shoot this out. What are you most excited about expanding your usage on when it comes to process automation? Dashboard publishing, Spark and Motion automations, business intelligence, or all of it together? So feel free to answer. Got all of it together. Spark, Motion. Oh, cool. All of it together. I'm really glad that came across because that's what I was really trying to preach. Because if I hit enter, you'll see that that is the correct answer. That's kind of the point. It's not about dashboards. It's not about Spark. It's not about business intelligence. It's about how you can creatively utilize those tools to create awesome outcomes. And that's really where I would love to see more and more people go. And I want to remind everyone, we do have the SiteStacker collaboration channel on Slack. Feel free to go there. If you're not there, request it. We'll get you in there. But there's awesome opportunity to collaborate there. I know some of you have asked questions. I would love to see more collaboration there. That's how we get to the next step. So real quick, I know we're about over time. I want to be mindful of that, but I also want to make sure there's time for questions. Are there any questions? If not, that's okay. But I want to make sure we leave time for that before we wrap up here. And then we'll get to the raffle, and then we'll get to one little announcement. I'm seeing all messages. Okay. I don't think there's any questions. Okay. That either means no one knows what on earth we just watched, or it covered things pretty well. So, how to add the button that can add a record. So that create record on the grid, that's actually based on user permission. If you have create permission in CRM, you can see that create record. And so if you don't, then you won't see that. And so that's kind of automatically done. So many questions. Yeah, I know there's a lot to learn here. We'll probably circle back because again, there's so much. So there's room for webinar material for a while. And so we'll probably do more webinars covering stuff like this. And maybe there's a chance for, if you have questions that develop after this, to send them in. And then once you send them in, we'll incorporate that into the next webinar. It can be more of a specific one. So yeah, there's a lot here. So one more thing, there's another module. You can note this down. It's called the Add Person module. And if you received our latest update, that's a module that allows you to publish fields that give admins the control to add a person right from a dashboard. And that's really easy to create. You don't even need a grid to be published in order to add a person. Super side note, we'll send some documentation on that at some point. All right. With that in mind, let's we're at the end of our automating process series. So thank you guys. I hope this was a helpful series. 4 episodes. You can always rewatch all of them. The goal was that they would stack further and further to show you more and more of the opportunities. I hope that that's what happened. Of course, there's always going to be more to explore. Feel free to reach out to our support team, visit our training site, all of that good stuff. One thing before the raffle, I want to make an announcement. Here's the announcement. Let's see. Okay, can I see? April 3rd through 5th, 2025, SiteStacker Conference will be returning to the Mission Inn in Orlando, right outside of the Orlando area. So for those of you who were there last time, we will have registration and some more conference themes and branding. This is the only place I've announced this. So for those of you who are on the webinar, you're in the M Club. We'll be sending registration information soon. We're trying to get really ahead of the game this time, so you guys have time to plan. We're really excited. This is going to be our best conference ever. I can't wait. So April 3rd through 5th, 2025, mark your calendars. I can't wait to see everyone there, and it's going to be a blast. So last thing here, we're going to do our raffle. I know we're going over time here. My Ryan is over here off the camera. If I do this, watch this. Nope, didn't work. All right. Sometimes the camera follows me. That was awkward. He's spinning the raffle. Click to spin. Let's see who wins. You're gonna have to take our word for it. And the winner is. Is it stopped? Yeah. Okay. Thomas Mayer. So Tom, I think from Team Missions, congratulations. You'll be receiving some Old Florida coffee. For everyone else, thanks for hanging in there and joining. Hope you have a great day. Feel free to reach out to support or any of us if you have any questions. We're here to help. Thank you, everybody.